Hi, it's Lerald, and GGG dropped their announcement for the upcoming patch 0.1.1, which will be landing in a few days and fixing a lot of issues with the state of the endgame. So this is a small patch, but at the same time, it's kind of a huge patch, because it's going to fix so many of the things that have been driving people absolutely crazy. Yesterday, GGG dropped about a 7-minute and 45-second video detailing all the upcoming changes. It was very densely packed, and then they also followed that up with like a 2-hour and 20-minute live stream Q&A with Gazzy and Darth Microtransaction. It was Jonathan and Mark, kind of all four of them talking. So there's a lot to digest, and I'm just going to get right into it. So let's start with what the patch is not. It's not a nerf patch, it's not class rebalancing, and this means that your overpowered characters are safe. So is my overpowered stat stacking Gimling. I'm really happy about this. I was a little worried, I think most people were, and that is definitely something coming later, but not now. Now, as for what the patch is, it is a fix for the most pressing issues that GGG felt they could solve in a week, mostly applied to the endgame. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but GGG gets a lot done in a week, and I am super impressed even with that knowledge coming in. I'm still impressed by how much they're getting done. They have managed to give players a lot of what we want. I expect more than what they've promised as well, because GGG kind of always keeps grinding until the last minute. So let's just hit all the big notes. I think the top change, number one for me, is that you can overwrite runes and soul cores in gear now. This is not the biggest change, not by a long shot, but it is absolutely something that the game has needed. It was just kind of a bad decision from the very onset, and so I'm glad they're reverting course on that so quickly. They're also redesigning towers. The tower map has been changed from the Path of Mourning in Act 2, which is a zone that kind of sucks, to the Spires of Deshar. It's the very next area that you transition into out of the Path of Mourning. It's just a much better layout, easier to see around in, easier to maneuver through. It's just better. Additionally, they're adding 4 new tower maps, including Mesa, which is my favorite map from PoE 1. It's gotten a pretty significant facelift for PoE 2. It looks pretty nice. There's also a lot of bossing updates for the end game. There is a new tablet that's being added to the game you can apply to towers, and that will add bosses into a bunch of maps in the area. And also it has a bunch of boss-specific mod roles on it, like increased quantity of items dropped from bosses. Additionally, the boss spawn rate has just been buffed. I knew it wasn't 1 in 4, and it turns out I was right. I feel vindicated. Bossing is going to be a much more viable farming method, and I am super excited about that. I also just love the tablet system too. I just kind of want to gush about that for a second. It has been such an effective replacement for scarabs from PoE 1. I really like what they're doing with it, continuing to expand it, adding in bosses. So brilliant. I'm very excited about this. This is the set of changes that I am most excited for out of the whole patch, to be honest. And kind of spoiler for an upcoming video, I guess. I definitely want to figure out exactly how profitable doing a primary boss farming strategy is. I think it could be really fun to do and potentially very good. There are also just a lot of Atlas buffs. They're increasing the zoom, right? Stuff that we've wanted. They've also said that they're going to work on a search feature, although that's not necessarily going to be in the patch. Citadels will now glow even when they're out in the fog, so they're just way easier to find. And also, Jonathan confirmed that all of the gamer voodoo about Citadels was exactly that, gamer voodoo. They just had a minimum spawn distance from the starting point. They couldn't spawn that close to the origin point of running the Atlas, and that minimum spawn distance is actually being reduced. They're also making it so that Jamin Ra, the Copper Citadel, the Act 2 boss, will no longer do a massive one-shot when he dies. There was kind of a bugged ability hookup where sometimes he would just basically do a massive explosion of damage at the end of the fight. It killed me in our last video talking about Citadels. And so that will no longer be the case. Pretty happy about that. And then also, you get 6 attempts now at killing the Arbiter of Ash. They will expand this to all of the other Pinnacle bosses. Mark said in the Q&A afterward that King of the Mists will probably get this change, like 95% chance of getting this change in for King of the Mists with this patch. But they said the other bosses may take a couple more weeks because they're worried about people doing stuff like clearing the entire breach, intentionally dying to the breach boss, and then re-clearing the breach. They have to actually solve that issue of making a checkpoint at the boss. Now, I'm just speculating here, but I do think this means we may get our next much bigger patch pretty soon, because as they said, this will take a couple more weeks, not like a couple months. And, it's not confirmed, of course. We may just get another small patch in a couple of weeks, but I feel like there's a real possibility that we get a kind of big patch toward the end of January or start of February, and that is very exciting. There's also just some generic mapping buffs. Mark actually gave a number for this. He said there's about 30% more stuff in maps on average. Now, stuff means like monsters, chests, essences, strongboxes, shrines, stuff to do and see and kill. There is more of an emphasis being put onto different maps having different upsides and downsides to them, such as higher monster density in maps that kind of just suck right now, like Augury and Mire. Mark really put a lot of emphasis on how important this is to him during the Q&A, so I think it's going to be a critical aspect of map juicing. It's something you definitely want to pay attention to. He really detailed how some map tile sets are going to have more monsters in them, so that map mods that increase the number of monsters or give more rares will have a multiplicative effect with that. And then the same goes for maps that have more chests or whatever else. So paying attention to your waystone prefixes and the map layout that you are running is going to be critically important for in-game farming and optimization, which is exactly the kind of thing I love about PoE. Also, he said that just generally their goal with this is to partially fix some of the issues that come from Breach being orders of magnitude better than every other farm method. It's probably still going to be the best farm method right now, but if it's like 50% better or even twice as good as everything else, that's a big improvement over it being 10 times better. I guess we'll have to see on that one, but at the very least, maps should feel a lot less empty. All of these changes will passively help with map sustain as well. Now, to be honest, I'm not really having any problems with map sustain. Like if I just pull up my map tabs here, I got some maps, I got a lot of maps. But I do think that the combination of one death maps, not enough map bosses spawning, and just not enough monsters and things spawning in the maps has caused a problem of not enough maps spawning for a lot of players. They're also going to be buffing strongboxes, making them just suck a lot less. That's like their language that they've used. They're going to suck less. I trust them. I'm looking forward to them not sucking because they suck right now. So if they're less suck, that would be great. They're also going to work a lot on improving visibility of ground effects, and I have to say, looking at the footage of me playing the game and there being all death ground effects for monsters, and then looking at their footage from the upcoming patch, it is pretty significant. There are a lot of very pretty maps, like Blooming Fields is one that really stands out as being visually very beautiful, but all of the pretty scenery gets in the way of seeing the mechanics, and so what they're going to do is they're going to go out there and cut the grass. This is an excellent change. I don't really have a lot more to say. I just think it's very good to reduce the visual clutter. Even if it means that the maps are less beautiful, I would rather be able to see what's gonna kill me and avoid it than be awed by the beauty of the thing that's hiding all of the mechanics. Map load time is also being reduced. This is probably the change that's going to affect the most people, just like hitting M. It's no longer going to be this. I'm still loading. I cannot believe that I'm still loading. And, yeah, it's going to be a normal map load time in the upcoming patch. That's obviously great. That is something I would love for them to have already fixed in 2024, but hey, we're getting it now. Then there are going to be a bunch of small buffs to non-breach league mechanics, like 20% more Spimulacrum Splinters, 60% more Omens from Ritual, and more rarity on items with Expedition crafting. None of this really moves the needle for me in terms of breach. Like, it's still utterly dominant, but I am interested in doing more rituals just to kind of see how big of a difference 60% more Omens winds up actually making. Maybe it'll wind up being great. Then there are unique buffs, and this is the one big change that hasn't been well received at all. They displayed, I think, a dozen uniques that are getting buffs. I've gone through all of them. Most of the buffs are extremely small, pretty unremarkable, and not really even worth devoting a lot of time to. There's still time to make more changes, and GGG will often show us the least interesting uniques when they're doing something like this, and then hide some of the really, really compelling ones. So maybe that's what's happening here, but the response on this front has been largely negative. Reddit's really been clowning on the plus 5 DPS that's being added onto low-level maces like Frost Breath. That kind of thing doesn't really change anything or even make it useful or interesting for leveling, much less build defining for high-level characters. There's also going to be a lot of monster balance. I mean, this is pretty much expected. They are going to be removing the ability of some monsters to off-screen players with skills like Corpse Explosion and Meteor, and that is very good. There's also just going to be more general balance tuning on damage and skills. There's also going to be the addition of loot filters for console players. This isn't something that affects me, but it's still a huge change, and I'm very happy that it is finally happening. I feel really bad for console players that they've had to suffer for the last month with no loot filters. And then also, just as a PSA, Filter Blade is now functional for PoE 2, so go ahead and use that and get your loot filters set up. Now I want to talk about what I think still needs to come along. So the first thing, most important thing, it did get asked about in the Q&A, and we were told whenever it's ready, and that would be stash tabs. I just showed off all of my bajillion maps, and I need a map tab, I need breach tabs, right? They're eating up all my currency spots. I need a tab. So definitely we want more tabs coming along. That's a big one. League mechanic balance is also still a pretty big issue, even though they're doing the tiny round of changes this week. Breach is obviously the front runner among the 4 main league mechanics that exist, and obviously there's just going to be a lot more that needs to be done to make Expedition into a useful mechanic. They addressed this specifically in the interview. They said, just straight up, Expedition was a rush it out the door kind of option, just so that there was something at least for players to do. That's pretty much what I expected. I'm curious to see what they have in store for it once they get more time, and I'm glad that they've at least acknowledged that problem. I think one big fix here would just simply be the addition of new league mechanics, which is something that'll definitely come down the line. Blight and Harvest are really the 2 that I'm looking forward to. You know, maybe they have brand new ideas that we've never seen before, and we could get those in this game, and maybe we'll even get them filtered back into PoE 1. That would be interesting, but Blight and Harvest coming into PoE 2 would bring a lot of joy for me and for a lot of other people as well. Skill rebalancing is also something that definitely needs to happen. You know, we're not getting nerfed, which is great, but there are a lot of underpowered skills, mace skills across the board, and just a lot of skills that really aren't getting any play because they aren't nearly as strong as a lot of the skills that exist right now, and, you know, they could definitely use more work. Also, new leagues. There's kind of an important note on this. Jonathan said that their intention with early access is to have a release cadence on big patches that is similar to their PoE 1 release cadence, and that's every 3 months for people who haven't got a lot of experience with PoE 1. That is more the way that they used to do it prior to the past calendar year or so, but normally it's every 3 months. They also said that they will be doing new leagues, which are effectively economy resets, so expect nerfs and big skill changes at those points, but not before then. Like I said before, this does mean that overpowered builds are actually going to be fine for now. With that being said, Mark did specifically name check Pillar of the Caged God and Comet trigger builds as points of concern, so we're not in danger right this second, but expect to be nerfed into dust in the next league. That's okay, there will absolutely be new overpowered builds to discover when those nerfs come. I think the next big thing to add are the 4th, 5th, and 6th acts. They don't really know what the release schedule for them will be either. They have talked about releasing them one at a time or releasing them all at once. Obviously, they're going to have to work on them and release them at some point, and having kind of sat and thought about it for a few hours now, I kind of think that waiting until all 3 acts are ready to drop at once is the better move. That'll allow us to smoothly transition from 3 acts and then 3 cruel acts as our campaign into all 6 acts as the campaign, and it'll feel more like a natural transition instead of slowly slapping in Act 4 and then we get used to that, and then slowly adding in Act 5 and we get used to that, and just doing that over and over again over the span of like 9 months seems a little weird. I think they also need to address item rarity on gear. This was another subject of discussion in the Q&A, and they didn't really have a lot of opinions on it. They just said they wanted to look more at the data on it. I would say that this has been one of the most hotly discussed subjects in PoE 2's first month of early access, and I'm really just curious to hear what they have to say once they've given it more consideration. On a personal level, I'm not really a fan of gear that makes you get more rewards. I really want stuff I equip to scale my character. Now, the argument that a lot of people who like rarity or quantity or whatever make is that it's another part of the gearing puzzle, and I appreciate that. It's a way to add something to your character that isn't just DPS or defense. But in my mind, there are a lot of other ways that you could add utility onto gear that isn't DPS or defense, and I would be happier with being able to emphasize other stats like reduced mana costs, or less damage taken from ground effects, or more move speed after killing enemies, or more stun uptime on enemies, or things like that. There's just so much interesting utility potential on gear, and using those item slots to get item rarity is actually kind of boring to me. I would rather that burden be shifted onto maps and towers exclusively, but that's just me. Maybe I'm wrong. Another big issue is the absence of crafting techniques, and this is something that they acknowledged in the Q&A. Right now, I think crafting feels bad and slot machine-y because the only real crafting methods you have, for most players at least, are either spamming Exalted Orbs onto a rare and hoping for the best, or Chaos Orbing a rare and hoping for the best. I think more methods will come as they add more league mechanics, but GGG is definitely going to need to make a point to fix crafting with those new league mechanics. Doing more with essences would also be a really good option. I think everyone likes essence as a mechanic in PoE 1, other than the spam rerolling aspect of it, and I think that it could work really well in PoE 2, but it's just far too RNG now due to both not controlling the mod type or the mod tier. I think something has to give there. There's just too much variance in essence as it currently exists. Crafting is a really big issue, and Mark acknowledged that in the Q&A. He said it was a top 10 issue for them, so I do feel reassured on that front. Something I'm not exactly sure if I want to see changed or not, to be honest, is the map clear conditions. I think more variety being added to the in-game mapping system, other than just killing rares, sounds like a good idea, right? More variety, that's good. But with that being said, the only alternatives I can think up to killing all the rares are worse. They suck. I'm talking escort quests, I'm talking pull all the levers, pick all the flowers. I'm basically describing the worst kind of quests from World of Warcraft or Diablo 4 for that matter. At the very least, the in-game probably needs some kind of fix to the boring situation of reaching the end of a map and finding that you need to run all the way back to the start of the map to kill a single rare. That feels bad, but more importantly, it feels like the first draft of the end game. And I guess it is, so it probably needs more iteration, but I don't know if that's just simply fixing that particular situation or actually having more victory conditions for maps. I really don't know what the fix is there. Alright, obviously I think the Atlas passive tree needs more work as well. I like the Atlas passive tree as a concept. I think it works pretty well mechanically. I think splitting up the different league mechanics has been a pretty good idea, but with that being said, the acquisition rate of the league mechanic trees is definitely too slow, and the general tree is pretty simple. Like a lot of these things where we're just taking like 5% quantity, that feels kind of boring. So I would like to see more passes over the tree. I think the final thing I'm looking forward to, at least in this list, it would be the Huntress. I'm super excited about it. I don't really have anything else to say other than that I guess it's coming in the next giant league level patch. Maybe that's later this month, maybe it's early February, maybe it's not until March, who can really say? Alright, let's wrap things up. This patch is densely packed with quality of life and necessary fixes to Path of Exile 2, and I am super excited about it. I'm super excited about the bossing tablets and putting a lot more effort into farming bosses around the Atlas. We are going to get the patch notes in the next day or so, and I imagine there will be a lot of stuff we weren't expecting slipped into there as well at the last second, so that should be pretty fun to take a look at. 2025 looks like it's going to be a really good year. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it. We are closing in on 20,000 subscribers, which is a huge milestone for us, and if you want to support us even further, consider becoming a channel member. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching, and get hyped for patch 0.1.1. Bye.